Welcome to Home Biz Tax Talk. My name is Lysandra Everett. I am the Home Biz Tax Lady, where I help home business owners win the tax game. Home Biz Tax Talk airs Monday through Friday, 9 o'clock-ish. And when you tune into my show, you're going to hear about topics that are important to the home business community. Okay. So lately, I have been getting a lot of questions about spouses being in business together. So this live is devoted just to spouses, okay? Because there are lots of options. Well, I won't say a lot, but there's a few options for spouses being in business. All right. So the first thing is, who is this calling my house? This messing up my live broadcast. I don't know. Okay, back to where I was. I'm over here trying to be professional and folks calling my house knowing good well I got a show. All right. So the first way for spouses to be in business together is called a qualified joint venture. And that is basically an unincorporated business where spouses are partners. Okay. And so when you say unincorporated business, you think about a sole proprietorship, but with with the spouses as the owners. So that's the qualified joint venture. And then the next way is in a partnership, in a standard partnership where you file a 1065 return. All right. And those are due in March, by the way. And then there's the multi-member LLC. Okay. And I think where most people get hung up is on the multi-member LLC and really understanding that that is still a partnership unless you live in a community property state. Okay. The first state that comes to mind is California. I think there's about 7 community property states. But let's talk about a few things. So with the qualified joint venture, again, it is an unincorporated, business structure where the spouses are partners in this business. And with the qualified joint venture, you are both partners, both spouses get credit for the self-employment tax. Your self-employment tax is your Social Security and Medicare. And this is really important because the mistake that some spouses make is they may have a qualified joint venture, or they might have, where one person is the owner. Well, with that Social Security and Medicare gets credited to that one particular spouse. So if you actually have a qualified joint venture, you want to make sure that each spouse gets credit for the self-employment tax because that's what goes to your Social Security and Medicare. Okay. Now, then there's also the option of one spouse owning the business and the other spouse being an employee. Now, there's pros and cons to it all, right? In the different types of structures. This is why you consult with someone to figure out what's best for you. But when you have, one spouse owning the business and the other spouse is an employee, you have payroll involved and all of that. But, what you have to make sure of is that if you have your spouse as an employee, your spouse cannot have a boss out benefit package that's not offered to any other employees that you hire. So if your spouse is the only employee, then you can kind of tailor that benefit package to benefit your entire household. This is why you consult with people. But you also, whatever you offer to that spouse as an employee, if you hire other employees, you have to offer them the same thing. So you really have to be careful with the benefits that you offer with your company, because like I said, you can't give your spouse the boss out package because that's your spouse and then everybody else kind of gets whatever. That's not how it works. So this is why you consult with, an enrolled agent for tax purposes, a CPA, and consult with a tax attorney. There are different moving parts that are involved. You consult with HR specialists, when you're talking about creating benefits packages, right? Because, there's lots of nuances in that. So, as a business owner, again, we can't do it all. We are not specialists in it all. So this is why you hire people and consult with them, because they'll save you lots of money on the back end. All right. Now, with a partnership is just that, two people are going into business together. It just so happens that they're spouses. Now, The biggest thing in all of this, in spouses going into business together, is really the partnership agreement. And this is what most people have the biggest problem with, is the partnership agreement. And I recommend that people hammer out partnership agreements before they form any type of structure, before they go into business at all. Because the partnership agreement is really going to lay out who's responsible for what, and who's going to be in what lane. And a lot of times people think, oh, because we're married, we've been married forever, we just know each other and all of that. No, that is unacceptable, because the moment that you assume that you know what one partner will do, that's when you start getting yourself into trouble. So hammering out the partnership agreement is absolutely crucial. Like I said, to hammer out who's going to be in charge of what. What portion of the business is one spouse going to be responsible for? What portion is the other spouse going to be responsible for? Who can bind the partnership? Can one partner go out and make a deal on behalf of the partnership without the other person being involved? Can one partner go and, take out loans? All of these things that have to do with the finances of the business and the management of the business, that has to be hammered out so that people, so that you go in with an understanding of how things are going to work. And so when things start to, get kind of funky, because it always happens in business. I don't care if you are a sole proprietor partnership, it gets funky in business, right? And so by having this partnership agreement that's all hammered out before you even get in business, it gives you a platform. It gives you a foundation on what you agree to do to run the business before there's money involved, before it gets all emotional and all that stuff. Because when the money starts coming in and, things start to not go right, then, all of the logic goes out the window, right? And so that's why I stress that it's important to have this partnership agreement hammered out, whether you are the qualified joint venture, if you are in a partnership, if you've got a multi-member LLC, if one spouse if one spouse owns the business and the other is the employee, it's still important to have this document written out, because like I said, it's that foundation. So when something goes wrong, you can go back and say, okay, this is what we said we're going to do. And the partnership agreement is a living, breathing document. Okay. So if you said you're going to do one thing and it turns out that that's not working out, then you can agree to do something else. But you have to have something in place so that you get who is going to get what, right? Who's going to be responsible for what. But it also hammers out ownership. Now, this is important because, when it comes down to, disagreements in the business, the way that the business is going to go, like really, if you're 50-50, then each one of you has an equal say, then what's going to happen when you don't agree? How will you handle those disagreements? So it's important for you as spouses to plan for disagreements, because it's going to happen. Like, how are you going to handle that? Will you hire a third party to help you figure it out? And like I said plenty of times before, prayer and supplication is not the answer, okay? You need to have something in place that says, okay, if we disagree on expanding the business, this is who we're going to call and hire to help us figure this out. If you've got a disagreement about funding or loans or anything, this is who we're going to hire. And then how will you decide if you're going to bring in another partner, right? If, one spouse comes to the other one and says, okay, well, I just made so-and-so a partner. Is that going to be cool? Probably not. So you have to have an understanding of, if we choose to bring on another partner, this is the decision-making process that we're going to go through. And then really, what are the partner's rights? Like if one partner, and we never want marriages to break up. But when you're talking about a business too, you gotta figure out, okay, if one partner doesn't want to play in the sandbox anymore, how is that going to work? Does one partner have the right to sell their part of the partnership to someone else before they offer it to the other partner? How does that work? So when we talk, marriage in itself is hard enough. Okay. Because you're talking about family, you're talking about kids and business and money. Marriage in itself is work. Okay. I don't care what other people say. It's not a walk in the park, because you know what? You're in this. But when you add the layer of business, that adds another layer of complexity. I mean, I've seen it to where there were, spouses that were in business together. They couldn't be married anymore, but they made great business partners. That's wonderful, right? But you have to decide, on the back end, if one partner wants to get out, what is the getting out process? Right? And even if it, turns out to be for a health reason or a family reason, not necessarily your marriage not working out, but, one partner might just like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. So then what's the process? So these are the things that you have to really work through if you're going to be in business together as spouses. It's not just, we're just going to go and figure this out. There are some things that you need to talk about ahead of time. And then if you can't hammer this out ahead of time, then I wouldn't recommend going into business as partners. It might be that one partner is, one person, like, this is going to be my business, and the other person can just be the support, So it's not just, going into business. It's really being able to have these difficult type discussions that are business focused, and that you're not, mad at home. And so then you take, mad into the business, or you're mad at the business and you take mad into the home, so there's a lot of working pieces when it comes down to spouses being in business together. And it's not just, not to expect it to all be roses, because there are going to be some rough patches. And you have to have a plan in place to deal with rough patches. Just like in your marriage, if you know that when you go through a rough time that you might, go to a counselor, and you plan for that, well, you got to do that in business too. Now, the other question I get a lot is, do I recommend dating couples going into business together? And I tend to not, recommend that. But at the same time, again, it's all about the agreement. Like, if you are in this relationship with someone that you are not married to, and then all of a sudden something happens with the business or something happens with the relationship, what's the getting out process? Okay. Now, when it comes down to multi-member LLCs, okay, again, this is something that I see a lot of spouses make this mistake. They form a multi-member LLC thinking that it is still treated like a single member LLC because they're married. And more often than not, that is not the case. Like I said, in community property states, and I do believe there's 7 of them, that's the case. So you got 43 other states that say no. When you form a multi-member LLC, you are no longer a qualified joint venture. You are a partnership. And so then you must file a partnership return. Okay. So yeah, this is, these are some of the things that, when you go and you file these things online and you just do this stuff yourself, this is the part that is not, expressly told to you. You are expected to know. You are expected to know that when you form a multi-member LLC with you and your spouse, that you are now a partnership. You're expected to know these things. And a lot of times I get people asking, well, why didn't somebody tell us? And my next question is, who did you ask about going into business before you did it? So if you didn't ask anybody about going into business, with your spouse before you did it, or forming this multi-member LLC before you did it, why is there someone else responsible for telling you stuff that you don't know? This is why you hire professionals. All right. This is why you do it. So, so if you're a multi-member LLC, 43 times out of 50, you are a partnership. The only time that is not the case is when you are in a community property state. But otherwise, yes, you are a partnership. Qualified joint ventures is an unincorporated, two spouses being in partnership together. Or you can have a formalized partnership agreement where you're forming the 1065. So the multi-member LLC is a disregarded entity. That means that, if you form this multi-member LLC, the IRS says, great, you're a partnership, you're going to form a 1065. You're going to file a 1065 return. So I hope that helps my spouses out there understanding the different ways that you can be in business. So you can be a qualified joint venture, you can be a partnership, you can have a multi-member LLC, or you can have one spouse that owns the business and the other spouse is employed in the business. There's pluses and minuses to each of those different types of structures. Consult with an enrolled agent, a CPA, a tax attorney, someone that has some experience in this to really help you understand, tax implications, legal implications, all those things before you go jump off into the business abyss and then you wind up with some stuff that you really don't want. All right. But by and large, if you get the partnership agreement hammered out, everything else will work itself out. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Home Biz Tax Talk. Again, we air Monday through Friday, 9:00-ish, and you can come right here to get your questions answered about your home business taxes. All right. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.